In this lecture, we are looking at the key navigation attached property. This is a property that adds focus navigation properties to focusable UI components. Let's go to Qt Creator and play with this. Here we are in Qt Creator. Let's create a new project. We call it Key Navigation Demo. Store it in the usual location. Hit Next. Choose the Qt version that you have installed and choose our key. We want to change the title here to Key Navigation Demo. We are going to add a row component inside. It's going to be in the center of the rectangle, so we're going to center it in the parent. And we are going to put two rectangles inside. The ID is going to be first rect ID. The width is going to be 200, and the height is going to be equal to the width. We want to have a border color of black. We want the rectangle to have a color of green, and we want it to start with the focus set to true. It's going to start focused. It's going to be able to receive key events. Because we want to know when it has focus, we are going to add a keys attached property and listen for the key number 5 being pressed. You already know how to do this from the last lecture. And we are going to say console log I am rect1 to know that it is the first rectangle here that has focus. We actually want to copy this rectangle and paste it down here and modify it a little bit. We are going to change the ID. And it is going to be blue. Why not? It's not going to have the focus by default because we want the first one to start with the focus. And when you hold down the key number 5, it is going to say I am rect2. Okay, now we get to use key navigation. Key navigation is a property that allows you to navigate through your UI components when some key is pressed. Let's go to its documentation. Okay, you can see that we can detect when the back tab is clicked, down, left, right, up, and the tab key. So we want to move the focus to the right for this first rectangle when you click on the right button. So we are going to say keys, key navigation, right, and it's going to move to second rect ID. You specify your target element by its ID. We want to do something similar to the second rectangle here. When you click on the left button, while this rectangle has focus, we are going to transfer focus to the first rectangle, which is identified by this ID, first rect ID. And we do that like this. Okay, and how do you know which rectangle has focus? We are going to press on the key number 5, and it's going to tell us which rectangle has focus, like we do in the console log here. Let's run the application. Okay, we have two rectangles. The rectangles are laid out in a row component. And the green rectangle, because it is the first one, it's going to be to the left. The blue rectangle is second in the row component, and it's going to be to the right. Okay, so what we want to do is to hold down the key number 5, and you see that rectangle 1 has focus. I'm going to touch the right arrow key on my keyboard and click on number 5 again. You see that rect2 has focus. Click on the left arrow key, click on 5. You see that rect1 has focus. And you can see that we are successfully transferring focus from one rectangle to another using this key navigation attached property. And again, it is an attached property because the rectangle doesn't have these properties by default. We are attaching these properties using this key navigation component here. This is what is meant when somebody says that a property is an attached property. Another thing we can do to make this app of ours even better is to handle the unfocused changed signal. Okay, so if the focus changes, we are going to check and see if focus equals to true for this component, for this rectangle here. If it's true, we are going to set its color to gray. And if it isn't, we are going to turn it back to green. We are going to do something similar to the second rectangle, but when it is not focused, we are going to turn the color back to being blue because that's what it was. And we need to surround this with quotes like this. Let's run the application. We click on the right, you see that the second rectangle has focus, so it turns gray. If we hold down the key number 5, it's going to tell us the same thing, that it has focus. We turn to the left, the first rectangle turns gray, but the second rectangle lost focus, so it turns back to blue. Okay, this should give you an introduction on how to work with key navigation to transfer focus between your UI components. But if we go back to the documentation for key navigation and look at the description, you see that they have an example here that we can try out. Okay, so it basically is 4 rectangles that are wrapped in a grid component, and the grid component is basically laying your rectangles or whatever is inside into a grid structure. We have the first rectangle, the second rectangle, the third one, and the fourth one. And if you look at the properties, they have a width and height. They have a color that depends on whether or not the rectangle is focused. And they transfer focus. When you hold down the right key while this rectangle has focus, focus is going to go to the top right. And you can see the same things. Okay, so I am going to copy all this code up to here. Comment out what we have in our application so far. So you don't want to delete it. You want to keep it for reference if you need it in the future. But we are going to paste in the code from the documentation. Okay, so we have our grid component here. Let's run the application and see what it looks like. What is wrong? We didn't close the last bracket here, so we should close it. This looks good, and down here you see that it is matched. Let's run again. You see that this thing is showing, but it is really small. Let's click on right. You see that focus goes to the right, down it goes down, left it goes left. But this is very small and it is not centered, so we can use our QML powers to turn it into what we want. I am going to get rid of this width and height because I don't need it. I am going to center it in the parent, and its parent is this window here. And I am going to turn its width and height to 100 because 50 is too small to see. Let's do 100. Copy this. Paste it here. Paste it here. We basically paste it everywhere where we need it. Let's run the application. It should be in the center now, and our rectangles should be bigger. Right, bottom, left, top. This is really good. This is nothing different from what we did before here, but they are using ternary operators here to change the color of the rectangle based on whether or not the rectangle has focus. This is the only different thing really. The other things are just transferring focus to the IDs of interest. This covers all we set out to do in this lecture. In the next one, we're going to look at a concept called focus scope. I'll see you in the next lecture.